Canada has been going on since the beginning of Canada's history. And in these final hours of campaigning before Quebecers vote on their future, the separatist leaders have played relentlessly on the French conviction that the rest of Canada has never respected them.
We know now that Quebecers will never be allowed to be a people under the government of Canada.
From the rest of Canada today, as well as from all the non-French speakers in this province, the message has been, please don't break up the country. Canadians demonstrated in Newfoundland to the east, Ontario next door, and in Western Canada, pleading for Quebec to stay. The Prime Minister, a French Canadian from Quebec, made a last-minute plea for unity.
Canada without Quebec, it's no more Canada, and Quebec without Canada, it's no more Quebec, because the two are together.
Those French who are eager to vote for their independence tomorrow held a last-minute rally south of Montreal this afternoon. For the millions of Americans who cannot comprehend their closest ally and largest trading partner breaking up, you are looking at an exercise in tribal unity. French Canadians for whom preserving their culture and their language is more important than preserving Canada. They have not listened to those who tell them that breaking apart will cost them dearly in every other way. This ethnic pride is widespread in the world today, and the resentment that comes with it is the angst of all minorities. ABC's John Mackenzie helps us to understand it here through the emotions of one family.
Bonjour, bonjour, bonjour.
To understand the independence movement in Quebec, it helps to know Emmanuel Marcotte.
Formidable.
Ah oui.
Au plaisir.
I believe in myself.
Okay. Bonjour, monsieur.
I believe in my people. I'm sure we'll organize a better society than what we have now.
Marcotte is a 56-year-old life insurance salesman in Hull, Quebec. He is also the local organizer for the Yes for Independence Committee.
We're different. We're different. We are French. We have the civil law, comes from France, and Canada they have the common law, which comes from England. I mean, we have different. We are Latin. They are Anglo-Saxon. I mean, we're not better. We're just different.
Like the Marcottes, 85% of Quebec's 7 million people claim French as their primary language. The overriding goal of the independence movement is to better preserve that language and culture. But for the Marcotte family, there is something more personal to this campaign. What they see as English Canada's historical lack of respect for French Canadians.
We've always been raised to think that we were second-class citizens. We've always been raised to think that we were not able to take care of our money, to get into high management, into private or public companies.
We've tried to get along and get our share of a lot of things, and it didn't work out.
The Marcotte family feels this distance from the rest of Canada, even though their Quebec home is just across the provincial border from Ottawa, the Canadian capital.
You don't think you can survive in Canada?
We're in the we will always be in a minority position. We want to change that. It's easy, just by a vote. We say we want to be a majority at home, and we will negotiate with any nation in the world, including Canada, equal to equal.
Are you saying any time a minority is disgruntled, they should just declare themselves a separate country?
No, they have to be a nation. And what is the definition of a nation? It's not the minority. A nation is you have a common territory, a common language, a common culture, a common history. This is the definition of a nation.
With the referendum now only hours away, Marcotte's job is to help find the necessary votes to turn that nation into an independent country.
Bye-bye. À la prochaine.
John Mackenzie, ABC News, Hull, Quebec.
Finally, based on the polls, it is too close to call, which is why there is so much anxiety in the country as a whole. And because what happens here tomorrow is of such consequence to the United States, we shall be here to report on the crisis during ABC's World News Tonight. Whatever happens, Carol, there is a formula here for civil strife on America's northern frontier.
Thank you, Peter. When we come back, what the Japanese...
We pray for all Quebecers as they prepare to vote in the referendum tomorrow. And we ask that all people will pray to know God's will and to exercise their privilege to vote.
Still, the polls say it is too close to call which direction the voters will point on Monday. And that's why leaders on both sides made last-minute appeals to swing those who are undecided.
Everybody understood that Canada without Quebec is no more Canada, and Quebec without Canada is no more Quebec, because the two are together.
Today, let us not be triumphant. Nothing is won yet. It's an extremely tight race. It's extremely tight. And what gives us an extraordinary faith and which pushes us to fight even harder till tomorrow night at 8 o'clock is that we know that we have a chance to win. And this chance we have, my friends, we do not have the right to let it go, to let it slip through our hands. We have it today. Let's grasp it and let's vote yes Monday. Let's say yes to ourselves. Let's say yes to the Quebec people. Thank you.
The people of Quebec will understand that it is possible to be a very proud Quebecers and at the same time an extremely proud Canadian.
In Quebec City, where the St. Lawrence could very well be the Seine, and the streets could just as well lead to Parisian destinations, and "we" to separation is the message on the window panes, carriage driver Billy Carroll is nevertheless content to remain a Canadian.
I'm living in a section where it's okay. Me, I'm glad of the government. He gives me an old age pension, and I earn myself a few dollars with the buggy. So, this is not for eat. This is for the drink beer.
Be a good American. Make all your neighbors jealous.
In an artist's market down the street, as Paul tries to coax a tourist into buying a painting, he says Quebec must pull out of the Canadian picture.
Here, we all the time need Ottawa permission, so that means we need a permission from those English or Commonwealth country. Anyway, you see my accent, and I'm a British subject. Can you believe it?
Fellow art dealer Yves prefers a metaphor closer to the romance of his French heritage.
Just for fun, ask a woman if she likes to live with two men. She will say no, and that's what we're doing since many, many years, to live with two men.
There are many who live and work in two provinces, in the neighboring cities of Hull, Quebec, and Ottawa, Ontario, linked by a bridge over the Ottawa River. At this Ottawa produce market, in the shadow of the Canadian Parliament, feelings range from laissez-faire.
I believe that Quebec should have the right to have their own language, like every other province. Okay. Second, I feel that politics stinks.
To let's stay together.
I'm from Quebec. I was born in Quebec. That's stupid.
Over the river in Hull, Quebec, the concerns come from the pocketbook.
I hope it's a no, because I don't think we're going to have a job in Quebec.
It'd be hard for both sides to make a living together.
Treaties would have to be worked out for both political and economic issues.
Indeed, should the separatists prevail on Monday, within about a year's time, this building won't simply be the seat of government for a province anymore, but for North America's newest nation.
And after 43 years, Billy Carroll might take his buggy and bolt.
When everybody votes yes, huh? Me, I pack up my baggage and I go somewhere else.
Ed Garston, CNN, Quebec City, Canada.
Canada on the brink. The vote in Quebec that could split America's closest ally into two separate nations. For the tourist hotels of Florida, the timber mills of the Northwest, and the assembly lines of Detroit. The enormous economic consequences for Americans if Canada comes apart.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, reporting tonight from Montreal.
Good evening. We are here in Montreal tonight, the largest city in the largely French province of Quebec, because as strange as it seems to millions of Americans, America's best friend and neighbor is in a state of unparalleled crisis. The world is looking at the real possibility that Canada, as the world knows it, is in the process of dying as a unified nation. It may be easiest for an American to understand by contemplating the possibility that one day, because you haven't been paying close enough attention, 1/4 of America, any part of it, says, "Thank you very much, we're leaving." The rest of Canada was incredibly slow to recognize how serious this was, and last week there was a desperate quality to many of the unity rallies and the candlelight vigils in the other regions. But all this emotion has not had much effect in Quebec, and the rest of Canada may be in for a major disappointment. At its most basic, this is about tribal rivalry. This is about French Canadians who believe their language and their culture are so threatened and their power as one of Canada's founding people so diluted that they can only survive with a sovereign state in the heart of North America.
There was a time my grandfather lost the war against the English people. Today, it's like if I give back my country to my ancestor and to my son and to myself. That's what I feel.
When the family breaks up, nobody wins, okay? Don't think you're gonna win.
For English-speaking Canadians who came from Britain and 100 other countries over time, this is about keeping Canada united as one of the most respected and envied nations in the world. ABC's John Mackenzie has been covering the voting today.
Everybody votes today. Every vote counts. Let's go.
Hours before the polls open, organizing committees all across the province issue their final marching orders. With the race too close to call, both sides, those for independence and those against, realize they must round up every vote they can.
She's in a wheelchair, in the hospital, in isolation. She will go at any time. Her vote is very important to her. So please pick her up at the hospital.
We need 2 vehicles to pick up 6 people at Parkhaven.
I'm very, very anxious. I'm very nervous. Within less than 12, 13 hours, our whole fate, our whole future is going to be decided, and it's a very, very scary feeling.
At polling sites, the lines form well before the 10 o'clock opening.
60-61, s'il vous plaît.
Among the first to vote, Quebec Premier Jacques Parizeau, the leader of the Separatist Party and the man who called for this referendum.
It's an important moment for all of us, and I think we're going to win it too.
No prediction at the ballot box from Canada's Prime Minister Jean Chrétien, a Quebecer himself, struggling to keep Canada whole. Pascal Dupont is a 6th-generation French Canadian, and if he has his way, the last. Today, he votes to make Quebec his country.
Is this an emotional day for you?
Very emotional, very emotional. It's a roller coaster. You walk into the room and you say, this is the big decision. I mean, you got that ballot, you got the question, is this what I really want? Just the whole process was hard, but, you know, I'm happy I did it.
Why was it hard?
In Canada, we have all the rights we want and stuff like that. We have great liberty and we have democracy, but then again, you know, you want something more. You want, it's all about heart. It's all about pride. It's all about standing up for your culture, for your language. And I mean, that's what it's all about to me.
But that is something millions of other Quebec voters today cannot understand.
Canada's a great country, and it's real important that we keep it together. There's no wars, there's no crisis, you know, and it would just seem futile to break up this country when there's no real basis for it.
I really feel devastated inside. I really feel, I can't believe that we're actually here doing this. I can't believe it.
Some Quebecers worried about the outcome of the vote are already transferring bank accounts out of the province. And some banks, wanting to avoid sparking any kind of panic among depositors, are stocking extra cash today in their Quebec branches. With the vote believed to be so close and emotion so high, the police in several Quebec cities, including here in Montreal, are going on emergency standby. With few exceptions, this has always been a civilized debate between English and French-speaking Canadians, but tonight no one is taking any chances. John Mackenzie, ABC News, Montreal.
If the results tonight are as close as predicted, there is the promise of further chaos. And if the separatists win by whatever margin, the rest of Canada will have to come up with something pretty quickly. The federal government has no mandate from the rest of the country to negotiate the country's dissolution. The power struggles are not over. And when we come back, what the United States has to lose. World. In some places, blink and you may miss it. This is an international border. But there are no fences, no guards adorning Canusa Avenue. That's BB Canada on the left and BB Plain, Vermont on the right. No wonder so many people take the closeness for granted. 3 miles down the road, the Haskell Free Library, built and paid for by a Canadian woman in 1901 who had an American husband.
Mrs. Haskell decided to do something in his memory, and she thought it would be nice to build it straddling the border intentionally so that both countries could benefit from it.
Canada and the United States live side by side like this, from the Atlantic to the Pacific. But here in the Northeast, where the U.S. meets Quebec, this is an especially agonizing day. In the Haskell Public Library, you may find the book you want in Derby-lined Vermont, but you would check it out in Rock Island, Quebec. Or the other way around, of course.
One last time. There you go.
They are sad in this neck of the woods today.
I was singing Old Canada the other day and cried. It's even upsetting now.
I can't imagine Canada without Quebec. Quebec is so much part of Canada.
And every American government has always agreed the strongest Canada is a united Canada.
I can tell you that a strong and united Canada has been a wonderful partner for the United States and an incredibly important and constructive citizen throughout the entire world.
This is an essential relationship for both the U.S. and Canada, the most lucrative trading relationship between any two countries in the world. $275 billion worth of goods and services were exchanged between the U.S. and Canada last year. So Canada's crisis is America's. One great fear is a drop in the value of the Canadian dollar, which would make Canadian goods in the U.S. cheaper and American goods in Canada more expensive. Either way, it is not good for either country. We asked ABC correspondents in various parts of the U.S. to be precise about some of the possible consequences. We begin with Lisa Stark, who's in Michigan.
For 3 decades, new cars and auto parts have moved across the U.S. and Canadian border duty-free, no tariffs, helping U.S. manufacturers sell 930,000 cars in Canada last year, 208,000 in Quebec alone.
It's enormously important. In fact, we consider Canada and the U.S. to be joined at the hip as far as being a domestic market.
An independent Quebec would have to negotiate a separate relationship with the United States. Without it, Quebec could face tariffs on auto imports or impose them on exports. That worries General Motors, which makes all its 135,000 Camaros and Firebirds in Quebec. Most are sold in the United States. Another concern is that a weaker Canadian dollar would mean far fewer Canadians could afford to buy American cars.
When you think about uncertainty in a scale that we're talking about here in Canada, that means that people do things like sit on their wallets.
Auto manufacturers hope eventually it would be business as usual with an independent Quebec. But in the short run, they are worried about an enormous disruption in trade. Lisa Stark, ABC News, Detroit.
This is Ken Kashiwahara in eastern Washington, where the lumber industry faces critical problems, partly because cheaper imported Canadian lumber has depressed prices. In the last year, the Vaughan Brothers, a small independent mill operator, has slashed its workforce by a third, laid off 155 employees, and closed a sawmill. The price of its lumber has plunged from $380 per 1,000 board feet to $314, a loss of $4 million in earnings. Now company officials worry about instability in Canada, worry that a drop in the Canadian dollar would allow Canadian lumber companies to sell their wood here even more cheaply than they do now.
That will mean layoffs, hopefully only slowly, but it's like having cancer. It's just going to get us a little at a time.
Vaughan is not alone. The U.S. imports more than $5.5 billion worth of Canadian lumber a year, and Canada's share of the American market has grown from 26% 4 years ago to 37% today. In the process, thousands of American jobs have disappeared. The fear here is that a further drop in Canadian lumber prices will force more American mills to close, creating more monuments to an industry in trouble. Ken Kashiwahara, ABC News, Colville, Washington.
This is Beth Nissen in Florida. Canada sends more tourists to the United States than does any other country, 15 million of them last year. Those Canadians spent $7 billion in the U.S., $2 billion of that in Florida, the most popular U.S. destination for vacationing Canadians.
Every time there's a change in the economy in Canada, we feel it down here. And it can mean the difference of truly putting food on the table of some American families.
The city of Hollywood, Florida, knows 50% of its tourist trade comes from Canada, most from Quebec. It used to be close to 70%, but the Canadian dollar has already fallen in value over the past 4 years. So has Canadian tourism here.
If they used to come for a month, now they're coming for 2 weeks. They just can't afford to come for as long a period of time.
or spend as much when they do come. Beachside shops are empty, restaurants half full.
No Canadian tourists, no business.
Instability in Canada can only cut further into tourism profits and jobs here, only add to forecasts of an economic chill from the north. Beth Nissen, ABC News, Hollywood, Florida.
And one more complication, if this becomes a longer-term crisis, a huge chunk of northern Quebec has been ceded by treaty from the government of Canada to the Indians and the Eskimos. There are vast hydroelectric projects on the Aboriginal land which provide power to the U.S. as well as Canada. Both the Indians and the Eskimos have said that if Quebec decides to leave Canada, they want to stay. When we come back, some of the other news today. A demolition in Chicago. Americans simply have a better sense of nationhood than Canadians do. Canadians have had this particular flag for a mere 30 years. Prior to that, the most dominant symbol on the flag was the British Union Jack. Historically, Canada was a collection of people who were not American. French Canadians, abandoned by France after France was defeated by the British here 230 years ago. British loyalists who fled the American Revolution. And over time, people from other parts of the world who thought this was a kinder, gentler nation than America, or who couldn't gain entry into the United States.
To the people of Quebec, to those that you who are undecided, please don't separate, please.
The passionate demonstrations in the rest of the country this week entreating Quebec to stay are totally out of character for most of the 30 million people who live here. This attempt by the rest of Canada to persuade Quebec at the very last minute is somehow akin to a parent's deathbed confession that they do love their wayward children more than the children know.
Pretty much just trying to send a message of love to Quebec, telling them that we want them to stay. It's late, but every little bit helps.
But this warring between French and the rest in the bosom of a single state has never been resolved, which is why the future of the country, however today resolves itself, leaves America's closest friend in a deep state of anguish. And that is our report on World News Tonight. A warm welcome tonight to our new affiliate WTVG Channel 13 in Toledo, Ohio. The latest on the election in Quebec on Nightline. We'll be here again tomorrow night. I'm Peter Jennings. Good night from Montreal.
This has been a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
It is the television event.
Are the neighbors splitting up? Quebec votes on whether to break away from the rest of Canada. John Roberts on what's at stake for Canada and the U.S. A soldier laid to rest, but not the questions about the wait for election returns. The polls are still open for voters in Quebec. Those voters are turning out in overwhelming numbers to determine the future of Canada's largest province. Should Quebec stay part of Canada or go its own way as an independent, mostly French-speaking nation? The stakes are large for Canada, Quebec, and the United States. John Roberts in Montreal begins our coverage.
What? Thank you.
Thank you.
Quebec today was a province divided. In Montreal's English-speaking neighborhoods, the urgency was to save Canada.
Did my job.
I feel terrible. I feel absolutely terrible. This is my country, and I'm very concerned.
Across town, in this predominantly French-speaking separatist stronghold, voters stood calmly on line. Many had waited 15 years for this moment. Another few minutes wouldn't matter. Separatists hoped to turn back their devastating loss in 1980, when independence failed by a wide margin. These are the people who believe Quebec's unique status as an island of French culture deserves nationhood.
I'm 29 years old, and I want to build a country, and I'm willing to try it.
The implications of an independent Quebec reach beyond Canada's borders. It would force the United States to define a new relationship with Canada and a French-speaking country of 7 million people on America's northern border.
Separatist leader Lucien Bouchard, who campaigned with his California-born wife, has maintained, with the U.S., nothing will change.
They are free traders. We are friends. We are partners. Where's the problem? We are a democracy. We like them. We like the Americans. We happen to like them more than live Canada.
But the potential impact on the $300 billion in trade each year between the U.S. and Canada is far from clear. The Canadian dollar and stock markets had plunged just from the fear of separation. It's a hint of what might lie ahead, according to opponents of independence like former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney.
This is a very irreversible and irretrievable step. You're going to throw away your country, not a prime minister or a president.
For 30 years, Quebec has tried to resolve its differences with Canada through negotiation, a process that's proved fruitless. In the end, independence may be the only way to finally put this issue to rest. John Roberts, CBS News, Montreal.
The White House is keeping a wary eye on the situation in Quebec. And on this one, the whole administration is in total accord. No one wants to see a divided Canada. In fact, White House aides tell CBS News that Mr. Clinton was hoping that reporters would ask him about succession at a news conference last week, so he could give this endorsement of the status quo.
I can tell you that a strong and united Canada has been a wonderful partner for the United States.
President Clinton, who's forged a close relationship with Canadian Prime Minister Jean Chrétien, also made it a point to state that today's vote is an internal issue. But U.S. officials say secession would create complicated questions about Quebec's role in international affairs, including participation in the North American Free Trade Agreement and the NATO military alliance. And House Speaker Newt Gingrich claimed the U.S. should learn a lesson from what happened in Canada and reassert English as the one and only official language here.
People who are capriciously for bilingualism need to recognize there are long-term dangers to the fabric of our society.
But most of all, U.S. officials say they don't want to see America's closest ally distracted by a long and debilitating internal struggle. Rita Braver, CBS News at the White House.